Welcome to the kitchen. And today I am here to show you how to activate your sourdough starter. It's dehydrated right now, and we're just gonna have to mix in some water and we'll bring this baby back to life. All right, let's go. You're gonna need your sourdough starter. You're gonna need a spoon, fork, or some other thing to use for mixing. You want a clean glass jar with a lid, and make sure they're very clean. That's important. Good quality bread flour, a food scale, a measuring cup for water. Open up that bag of dehydrated sourdough starter, and you're gonna wanna zero out your scale and make sure to set to grams. You'll place that clean jar onto your scale, and you're gonna zero out that scale again. This is just gonna ensure accurate measurements. Now you're gonna pour some of that dehydrated sourdough into the jar. And it's up to you how much you'd like to use. I used about half the bag, which came out to about 20 grams. So now that I have 20 grams of the powder, I'm going to add exactly 20 grams of water. But you will add equal parts water to whatever you added. So if you put in 40 grams of starter, you're gonna add 40 grams of water. You just wanna keep those ratios equal. It'll be the consistency of kind of grainy pancake batter. Sometimes I'll use a rubber spatula and wipe down the edges just to keep it clean, and I can watch the activity a little easier. So 24 hours later, we are going to check on the starter and give it its first real feeding. So we're going to dump all of the starter into another clean jar, and whatever that number was, we're going to add that exact same amount of water and give it a good stir. And now you're going to add that same amount of flour. So say you put in 40 grams of starter, now you did 40 grams of water and 40 grams of bread flour, and you mix it up real good, and you wait another 24 hours. You can kind of see a little bit of bubbles. All right, welcome to day 3 of making and rehydrating your sourdough. We've got our sourdough here right now, and you might see a little bit of bubble activity if you look along the sides of the jar. It may have a little funky, almost soggy smell. Sometimes people say it kind of smells like eggs or something. All sourdough has a different smell throughout its activity process. So feel free to keep smelling your sourdough and getting to know the different smells of when it's really ripe or when you've just fed it. And by day 3, that's when some of the smells are gonna come through. I bet in a couple months, it'll be a much more pungent. All right, so let's give this guy another feeding. Add your starter. Add the equal amount of water, and you mix it up real good. And then you also add an equal amount of bread flour. And so just remember to always keep those ratios equal. And as you can see right here is a little time lapse of the growth, and you might see something like this. All right, welcome to day 4 of starting our sourdough. She is looking really bubbly and active, and it gave a nice little pop release. And when you give it a smell, especially that first smell, it is very pungent and you'll feel it in your nostrils. So by day 4, you should have a really active starter with lots of bubbles and fun smells coming from it. If not, if it's still a little bit not as bubbly as this one yet, that's okay. It could be because of the water you're using. Make sure it is filtered. Sometimes using tap water, the chlorine kills some of the good bacteria, and it will struggle a little bit. Using a good filtered water will help guarantee that the bacteria stays happy and active. So we're gonna do one more feeding, and this guy's gonna be ready to turn into some bread or some pastries or pizza or whatever your heart desires. All right, let's give it a feeding. And pay attention that there was some leftover starter in that jar, and we aren't gonna throw it away. There's some amazing things you can do with that. Equal parts starter to equal parts water, and you mix that up to equal parts bread flour, and you mix that up. As you accumulate extra starter, you can save it in a jar in the refrigerator, and this is called discard, and there's tons of awesome recipes that I'll share with you so that you never have to waste any old starter. All right, welcome to day 5 of starting your sourdough starter. It is looking ripe and bubbly, and I would say if yours looks like this, you are ready to go. If it's not quite as bubbly yet, and you're just starting to see bubbles, I would probably give it a couple more feedings until you see that it's really active. All right, so let's get started on some sourdough. So we need lots of different supplies. You're gonna need your bread flour, a large mixing bowl, salt, sourdough starter, make sure it's active, filtered water, a food scale, a whisk, and a rubber spatula, proofing baskets, dough and bowl scraper, towels, beeswax or plastic wrap, lame, aka a scoring tool, parchment paper. I use reusable parchment paper. You will also need a Dutch oven or cast iron pot, and the full recipe and list of items you need and links to where to get a lot of these items will all be on our website, and there's a link in the description. You will begin by adding some of your starter to the bowl and make sure that you save the leftover starter in the jar to give a feeding once you've made your dough. Now you're going to add your water and you're going to whisk it really well. You are going to add your flour and you're going to add your salt. All right, here's the fun part. You're gonna roll up your sleeves, make sure your hands are nice and clean, and you're really gonna work everything together until it is one cohesive dough and there's no more dry spots or lumps. Work into your fingers and into your hand, kind of like a kid playing with Play-Doh or something, but this is really gonna get all of the dough properly hydrated. Have fun with it. And this recipe is for 2 loaves of sourdough, but you can always do a half recipe and make 1 or double it up and make 4, whatever your heart desires. So after you've mixed it up real well, you're going to cover it with a damp towel and wait 1 hour. And while you're waiting, that's the perfect time to feed your sourdough. And so you take that leftover starter that's in the jar and you give it a feeding like we've been doing. And now you have plenty of starter for future recipes. And now that an hour has passed, we are going to get our hands damp because this will help the dough to not stick to your hand. And you're gonna slowly work around the bowl, and it's called turn and folds. And you're kind of gonna pull out a side of the dough and just turn it over onto itself. And then you're gonna rotate the bowl and you're gonna do it again. And you're just gonna work your way a couple times around the bowl, and you'll notice that the dough will get a little bit tighter. And you're good, and now you're just gonna take that damp towel and you're gonna cover it and you're gonna let it sit overnight, or 8 to 12 hours. Then you're gonna flour some of your proofing baskets. I like to put a little extra in there and easily coat it and then dump it out onto a clean surface so that we can work our dough on that. That way there's no flour left behind. Now you're gonna take that dough scraper and you're gonna just work it out of the bowl into one blob, and you're gonna cut it into 2 with the metal scraper that I somehow didn't film. And you're just gonna kind of fold it into itself and make a little circle shape. And you're gonna wait 5 to 10 minutes. After 5 to 10 minutes, you're gonna flip it over and you're gonna make sure the bottom there is nicely floured so nothing sticks. And you're gonna stretch the whole loaf of dough out and you're gonna dimple it with your fingers. This is a high hydration recipe, so doing the little dimples are gonna help all the little air pockets get into your loaf. Now you're gonna gently push it in on itself like this and roll it up. And this is called the final shaping. And you're just gonna work it around, kind of tuck around and turn until it's a nice round shape. This step can seem a little complicated at first, but no matter what you do, it always works. Like the bread always comes out good. And there's so many other YouTube videos online that I recommend if you want to get better at it or learn other techniques. But this is what I do. Then once you have them in their baskets, you're gonna cover them with towels and cover them with plastic wrap or beeswrap, and you're gonna put it in the fridge for an hour. And then after an hour, you'll take one out while the oven preheats to 500 degrees. Once the oven's preheated, you're gonna dump that loaf onto a parchment paper and you're gonna score it with that lame, aka scoring tool. And there's lots of different little art pieces you can do with this. You can just have fun, but it's always important to have one good deep scrape because that's gonna help the loaf rise properly. You are now gonna wanna lower the oven temperature to 450 and bake the bread with the lid on for 30 minutes, then remove the lid and bake for another 20 minutes. And then I take tongs immediately and pull it, and I let it cool on a rack on the counter so that it doesn't get soggy on the bottom. And then you're gonna do that with both loaves. And when you're done, I recommend letting them cool at least an hour, but sometimes I'm psycho and I will cut right into it when it's hot because it's that delicious. For the full recipe, make sure you go to our website. The link is in the description. And let me know how your loaf turned out. And if you'd like some starter for yourself, make sure to comment sourdough below. And thanks for being here, guys. Enjoy and tune in for lots of future recipes.